A journalist once approached Einstein with the question, assuming Einstein would have been very proud of nuclear power because it was a peaceful use of nuclear. And Einstein smiled and said, it's a hell of a way to boil water.
Yeah, that's right. It's a massive Rube Goldberg way to boil water, one of the most complicated ways mankind has ever devised to burn
but there's more to that. If I, for example, went out in the backyard, took a large pot, and boiled an equivalent amount of water with heat from a fire that could be produced with heat in a power plant in a single day, I could boil water. In a year, you'd find the ashes. 10 years, you might. 100, you won't. 1,000 or 10,000 or 1,000,000, you'll never find where I boiled the water. But the same amount of water boiled for a single day with nuclear power, 4.5 billion years later, you can find that material, and it's still half as effective as it was before. I contend that's nuts.
So, other than the former head of the NRC, do you see anything, because you follow this issue very closely, do you see anybody else calling for massive rethinking of the nuclear power industry?
Oh, there's a lot of people. A lot of environmentalists are calling for that. There's a lot of, for example, I know I was on the Power Hour with Joyce Riley and with Mr. Gunderson. And we were talking about that kind of thing, and it's the type of insanity that we need to get a hold of, and we need to get a hold of it quick. And Arne Gunderson has that opinion as well. It's just like it's an insane thing to do, and he used to be an insider who worked on these things and designed these kinds of pieces of equipment.
I just recently went to a fair where they were talking about solar power for your own backyard and a lot of other things, and they had a guy up there telling everyone that it was a real tragedy that we weren't moving to nuclear power, that some environmentalist groups had opposed nuclear power and that was going to destroy the planet because of carbon dioxide. I mean, do you find that credible? That they would accept things like plutonium, depleted uranium, and yet choke on the idea that carbon dioxide is here, even though the plants can dispose of that. There's nothing that thrives or disposes of plutonium or depleted uranium.
No, I find that ludicrous. I think those people are completely crazy. That makes no sense at all. I'm shocked by that.
Yeah, but I have seen that. I've actually seen environmentalist sites saying that nuclear energy is better than solar because it has less of a carbon footprint. And they talk about creating solar panels and how much energy that takes. I mean, that's their calculus. They start from a false assumption that carbon dioxide is the most dangerous thing on the planet, which is demonstrably false. And then they extrapolate it back from that to say that the best, cleanest form of energy is nuclear. So that was my concern about it. I'm hoping that people will see the other side of this equation, really understand what's dangerous about these substances.
I'm sorry, I guess I'm a conspiracy theorist. I'd say follow the money. Who paid them?
That's right.
You know, I'm suspicious of anybody who's that stupid.
Well, there's a lot of people that are, and unfortunately, they've convinced a lot of grassroots people of that, too. Well, thank you so much for speaking about that. Again, your website is FukushimaUpdateReport.com. It's an aggregated site, information about Fukushima, which just keeps going. We're coming up to the 3rd-year anniversary. Thank you so much for telling us how to assess some of these. Well, actually, I guess we don't really have a good way to assess the danger, do we? That's really the takeaway, isn't it?
I don't think we do. We can't believe what the government says. We have no reliable institution anymore that would give us honest answers, and that's the sad part about it. How bad it is here with that, it is millions of times worse in Japan in the sense that those people don't have anybody to speak the truth to them at all. There's millions of children that have pre-lesion cancer lesions on their thyroid now when they could have spent less than $10 million handing out some iodine tablets to the entire country and no one would be affected.
And it's not just the Japanese government, it's the American government as well. They could have given those soldiers on the USS Reagan iodine tablets.
Yes. I mean, that's a war crime there.
So it's very difficult to know exactly what your radiation exposure is, and there's a few things that you can do to mitigate the damage to it, like iodine, other things, but basically it's very pessimistic if we don't get the nuclear power industry under control. Would you say?
I'd say it is. This is the kind of thing where it's kind of a doomsday situation, and people have asked me if it's such a doomsday scenario, how do you deal with it? How do you possibly deal with something like that a Carrington event could wipe us out? And I said, well, it comes back to my faith. It comes back to the idea that God gave us something, and it's life, it's a gift, but he put physics restraints on it. And my friend says, physics? What are you talking about? And I said, well, God kind of knew what he was doing. He says, look, you can't live yesterday, and you can't live tomorrow. You can only live today. So my attitude is, okay, if I live today, I look outside and the sun's shining and the birds are chirping, and I can look at my wife and have a wonderful day. I live that day as though it may even be my last day, and I enjoy that day to its fullest. And then the next morning when I wake up and it's another wonderful day, I do the same thing. Because really all we can do is live each day the very best we can. And like I told a friend of mine, if you didn't kiss your wife goodbye going to work, shame on you.
That's really well put. I want to talk about a little bit about this book and the plot of this book. You've got a book there of short stories. You're also an author besides a scientist and inventor. This book here, let me get this here so they can get it on the camera. Tell us a little bit about this book. It's a fiction book.
Yes, it literally is something I dreamed. It's kind of strange in that sense, but this is a type of story that questions who has right to own another human being or patent a human being. It's an expose, so to speak, into almost an allegory about right and wrong, in that the government wanted to create the super soldiers and were creating some kind of synthetic DNA to modify human DNA and extra chromosomes. It didn't work, and only 2 people survived out of 2,500 implanted embryos, and it was a horrible disaster. But the 2 people that survived were very, very unique, and this is their story about how they have to play a cat and mouse game with the government and get away from them, because they are considered lab rats. They're not considered human beings because their DNA is patented. And I don't buy that. I don't buy the idea that somebody can patent DNA and own another human being, but that's what it's coming to.
Oh, we're that close away from it. We're very close to it. When they could patent the genes for that breast cancer test, fortunately that got struck down, but we also see what's happening with GMO patents from Monsanto, where they can claim that if they trespass, essentially cross-pollinating onto somebody else's field, they can claim that as copyright infringement, even though it's really fundamentally a trespass. They're polluting somebody else's field.
I have this one question, David. When do we say that the ends do not justify the means? Is there any with that kind of courage? Perhaps it must ultimately and sadly fall to those exploited by the game gone mad.
That's the ultimate question, isn't it?
Yes.
We see that question so many times. We need to ask that question to the engineers who start following down these dark paths without ever looking at the ethics or where this is going to ultimately lead. They're simply interested in solving the puzzle that's put in front of them, or getting the gold ring or the money or the award, whatever it is that motivates them, but they're not looking at the long-term consequences or the ethics. And that applies not just to the nuclear industry or the DNA industry, the biological industry, but it also applies to people who work for DARPA. We see some horrible stuff that could possibly come down the pike from that, and we've talked about that many times. You have so many different things in your background that we could talk to you about. We could go on forever, but we're out of time. Thank you for coming in and talking to us. It's been really wonderful meeting you.
Thank you kindly.
Thank you very much. And again, that website that he has is FukushimaUpdateReport.com. And if you want updates not only on Fukushima, but everything that's happening in America, the police state, environmental issues, stay tuned to Prison Planet TV. Support us as a subscriber. Your subscription can be shared with up to 10 other people at the same time. It's a great way to spread the information and to support our operation here. We'll be back tomorrow at 7 Central, 8 p.m. Eastern.
Now you can watch The Alex Jones Show live as it happens at INFOWARS.com/show.
You'll find links to all of our content there and a free 15-day trial for Prison Planet TV.
More than 60 movies and documentaries all in one place at INFOWARS.com/show.